friends! Welcome to episode 2 of Musical Chairs with the Knights. In our first episode, we met David, who plays the French horn, Agnes, who plays the clarinet, and Alex, who plays the violin. In today's episode, we get to learn about the cello, the oboe, and we get a close-up look at the piano. Have you decided yet which instrument in the orchestra is your favorite? If we haven't included it on either of these first 2 episodes, let us know and we'll be sure to include it on one coming up. After learning about the cello, the oboe, and the piano, we'll have a short quiz at the end. So listen carefully and enjoy meeting our next group of knights, Jane, Gus, and Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the pianist of the Knights. Piano is an instrument that you see in the orchestra sometimes, not always, but it happens, and it has a kind of interesting role. But first I want to talk about some things that make the piano special unto itself, amongst all the instruments, right? For one thing, a lot of the other instruments play just one note at a time, right? If I play this, that's how, trumpet plays one note at a time, strings often play one note at a time, right? On the piano, you play all those chords, right? Moving notes, different parts. You hear that. I'm going to play a Rachmaninoff piece for you in a few minutes, and you'll hear all of the different lines winding around each other. So there's that. Another thing is that the range of the piano is very large compared to the other instruments, right? The cello plays kind of low down here. Violin plays up here, right? The piano has all this all the way up down, much larger than the others. So it kind of spans the whole thing, and it can combine with the other instruments in a really nice way. The piano has strings inside it, but it is actually a percussion instrument because whenever you push down a key, you hit a hammer that comes up and strikes a note, right? So that's why each piano note has kind of a strong front on it, and then it decays away like this. You hear it get softer and softer, right? The hammer strikes the string vibrates, and then eventually it dies away. Another special thing about the piano is that it has pedals. The damper pedal raises all the dampers on the strings and lets them vibrate, right? So if I do this, all of the strings are still vibrating, right? Because I've got the pedal pushed down, and then I take it up, and they all the dampers fall down, and the sound all goes away, right? In my life, I play a lot of new music, recently composed music, and there we often have much unusual ways of playing, right? Rather than just playing on the keys, I'm playing inside the piano. I'm strumming the strings. I'm tapping the wooden parts of the piano. So that is an unusual thing that I often do. I also wanted to say something about what the piano does in the orchestra, right? Because it's a little different than playing by itself. The piano has a sort of potentially neutral color, and it is a color that blends well with the other families in different ways, right? So if I play with the strings in unison something, the strings, since they have the bow and they draw the sound out of the string, they don't necessarily have the fronts of notes. So what you see is the piano is playing along with the strings the same notes, but it just is giving a certain kind of definition because the fronts of the notes are being highlighted by the piano attacks the same pitches, right? So that can happen. Also, sometimes you have solo passages where the piano plays as if it's a piano concerto for a few minutes. But something else that also sounds very good is the piano can be paired with the other percussion instruments, right? It sounds very well when the piano is up here, with the xylophone clanging around. It's very exciting, brilliant sound. So this is what the piano is, and thanks for tuning in. We're going to watch a little bit of the Knights, and then we're gonna see what the piano does in the Knights, and then I'm gonna play a Rachmaninoff piece for you. I hope you enjoy it. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Gus, and I play with the Knights Chamber Orchestra. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the oboe. When I was 5 or 6, I already wanted to play the oboe. But people said at the time, it takes too much pressure to blow through the instrument for a young person to play it. To make a sound on the oboe, you have to blow through one of these things. And the opening of the reed is tiny. I mean, really small. Smaller than an apple seed. A mosquito couldn't even fly through it. Getting the air to go through that tiny opening is what makes for all the pressure. But when you learn how to do it efficiently, it's not so hard. Still, people usually wait till they're 10 or 11 to start playing the oboe. As you might expect for a smaller instrument, it plays on the higher side. Here's the lowest note. Now that note is just below middle C on the piano, for those of you who know where that is. You can go up an octave, and another octave, and a little more. When you play the oboe, you can play it smoothly, you can play with short notes, or you can mix things up. But what really makes the oboe is the double reed. Now, what is a double reed? Before I started to play the oboe, I thought for some reason that a double reed must have meant 2 reeds, and that you play them like this. But I never saw anybody play the instrument with 2 reeds. But what it really means is that the 2 sides of the reed vibrate against each other, making the sound. And when you put it into the instrument, depending on what keys you put down, you get different notes. Beginning oboe players usually buy their reeds, but after a little while, they can learn to make them. I make my own reeds, and I'd like to show you how. To make a reed, I start with a tube of cane. Cane is a hard-shelled marsh grass, like bamboo. I split the tube lengthwise. I'll need to alter it in many ways to make a reed, and I soak it in water to soften it up for this work. I trim it, I plane it, I gouge it. That's all for the first day. The next day I take the piece of cane again and soak it. Then I shape it by folding it over a shaping tool and cutting off the excess. The shaped folded cane is tied to a metal tube with a cork over one end so the tube fits easily into the oboe. I tie the cane to the tube with thick thread. Then I start scraping the reed in order to make it easier to play. I cut open the reed, and once I've cut open the end, I finally have a double reed because I've separated the 2 sides of the folded cane. I measure, I scrape more, I touch up my knife when it needs it, and sometimes I try the reed. I'll scrape it more, adjust it, and finally try it in the oboe itself. I keep adjusting it for a couple days after this. Now that we have a reed, we need to make an embouchure. That's just a fancy way of saying how you're going to hold the reed in your mouth. Now it's true that there are double reed instruments where you don't make any embouchure. You just blow into a tube and the reed is inside vibrating freely, kind of like this. It sounds kind of wild, right? Well, the most famous of these instruments is a bagpipe. If I play my oboe with no embouchure, I can sound very much like a bagpipe. Making an embouchure with your mouth allows you to vary and change the sound, playing softly, loudly, and all together to shape the sound. The combination of making one's own reeds and different ways of holding the reed in your mouth make for one of the coolest things about the oboe, which is that everyone who plays the instrument sounds different. And in fact, You can go all over the world. There are lots of different oboes in lots of different cultures, but they all sound different because the reeds are all different from each other and because the players have a different way of holding the reeds. The oboe that I play is the one that became part of the orchestra. It came from the rustic shawms of the Renaissance. And these early oboes either had no keys or just one key, and they were very hard to play. The thing is that nobody expected the shawm to sound particularly pretty or even very in tune. It was part of the charm of that instrument that it was pretty raucous. But as time passed, people began to specialize in the oboe. They got control of their tone and of pitch, and so composers started to write more complicated music for the oboe. As a result of this, the players got even better, and then the music got even more complicated. By the time of J.S. Bach, there was a lot of great music that had been written for the oboe. I'd like to play for you now a short excerpt by J.S. Bach. In the orchestra, the oboe is often used as a solo instrument, which just means that you can hear it clearly above the rest of the group. Take this example by Debussy. In addition to playing solos, the oboe can also blend with other instruments, especially other wind instruments. Mozart used oboes in pairs to fill out the sound of the orchestra and have them sustain harmonies, sometimes only playing one or two notes. Another way the oboe is used in the orchestra is to play unfamiliar or exotic sounds. Take this example by Verdi. One last trick I'd like to tell you about is circular breathing. With circular breathing, it allows you to keep playing while you take a breath in. The way you do this is you puff air into your cheeks while you're playing, and then you squeeze your cheeks to press that air through the reed while you sneak a breath in through your nose. I'll show you what I mean. Now the sound changes a little bit for me. Some people can mask it completely. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about the oboe. Before I leave, I'd like to play one last piece for you by Mozart.
String family, and it's the second biggest member of the string family. So the violin is the smallest, then there's the viola, then there's the cello, and after that is the big guy, the bass. So as you can see, I have to sit down to play the cello. I'm sitting in my chair here, and I use this guy, the end pin, see this sharp thing here, to balance my cello. I put it on the floor, and then I'm comfortable with my cello. So one of my favorite things about playing the cello is how low I can play. Listen to this. So you get this really rich, low sound, but you can also play super high. So not only can you play in the cello range down low, but you can also play kind of like violin range. So that's a really cool thing about the cello. So you may have noticed that so far I've been using my bow to demonstrate. This is my bow, and it's made from wood here, and then on the other side is horsehair from a horse's tail. And that's what I draw across the string to make a sound. But sometimes composers ask you to play pizzicato, which means that you pluck the string with your thumb or your finger, and you get a completely different effect. Here's a little part from Benjamin Britten's Serenata for solo cello. So suddenly it doesn't really sound like a cello anymore. It sounds a bit more like a guitar, don't you think? There's a lot of very fun special effects that you can do on the cello. One of my favorites is harmonics. Harmonics is when you don't push the string down, you just lightly touch it. You can also slide up and down the string with harmonics. Super fun to do that. And my other favorite is an effect that almost sounds like seagulls. Do you think it sounds like seagulls? Really cool. I love that. Here's a little excerpt from Hedwig's theme from Harry Potter, which I know you all know. Now, what if the composer asked to play sol ponticello? That means the composer wants you to put your bow really close down on this wooden thing called the bridge, really near the end of the string, and listen to the effect you get. It sounds so different, right? It sounds, to me, much spookier than the normal way to play. And then you can make it even spookier by doing another effect called tremolo, which is where you move your bow really fast. So how about we do sol ponticello and tremolo? We'll see how Hedwig's theme sounds. cello on its own, or in a quartet, or in orchestra, or with piano. There's so many different combinations you can do. But when I'm playing in an orchestra, the main role of the cellos is a supportive role. So I think about the cello as being the foundation. So what if you built a house without a foundation? What would happen? It would just fall down, right? Or if you're building Legos and you don't build a strong foundation, then your creation will probably be a disaster. Same thing in music. The cellos and basses are so important that they lay the foundation. So we often play what's called a bass line. So we play low down. That could be a very simple bass line. So I'm going to give you an example from a very famous piece by Ludwig van Beethoven, who was a really famous German composer. This is a little excerpt from his 7th Symphony, the second movement. Here's the bass line. It goes like this. So that's a little part of the bass line from second movement. On top of that, some of the cellos are also playing a melody, and that's also what's great fun about being a cellist, is that you don't always just have to play bass lines. Sometimes the spotlight swings around and it's on the cellos and they're suddenly playing a melody. So you got this beautiful melody and the bass line, and when you put it together, it sounds like this. It's way too big. Guess what? They make smaller cellos. This is a half-size cello, and this is my trusty assistant, Aoife.
Don't call me that.
She is 9 years old and she's in the 4th grade. And she's going to play a tiny bit of one of her favorite pieces called Falling Leaves. From Johann Sebastian Bach's 3rd Suite for solo cello. Thanks for listening.
What directly strikes the strings inside of a piano? A. Keys. B. Hammers. C. Nails. D. Pedals. What are some of the ways that Steve plays the piano in new music? A. With the keys. B. Strumming the strings inside. C. Tapping the wooden parts. D. All of the above. An oboe played without an embouchure sounds like which instrument? A. A clarinet. B. A harmonica. C. A bagpipe. D. An accordion. Which of these is not a part of the reed-making process for an oboe? A. Soaking the reed. B. Hammering the reed. C. Trimming the reed. D. Shaping the reed. What material is used on a cello bow? A. Silk. B. Horsehair. C. Bamboo. D. Cat whiskers. What kind of structural support does the cello provide using its bass line? A. Scaffolding. B. The roof. C. Walls. D. The foundation.